Mike, you've been on our TV screens covering the NFL for the best part of 20 years. And how close do you think we are to getting an NFL franchise of our own in London?
That's a really good question, because I heard Alistair on the TalkSport NFL show this week, which I was also appearing on, but I wasn't in the studio. And Alistair Kirkwood made a pretty convincing case for it, much more so than I thought at the time. I still think there are problems to be overcome. But, the NFL with its resources, and thus far they have really amazing government support. And they've had it now from both mayors of London, but even more so from the national government, which they would need to kind of grease the skids for travel and passports and work permits and tax questions and things like that.
The logistics of it, could a franchise in London be legitimately competitive given the amount of travelling, the time difference and such?
It's not that much worse than a West Coast franchise that has to play a lot of games on the East Coast, which doesn't happen every year, but they will always have to play at least 3, and if the rotation comes around where they're playing the NFC East, it becomes 4. It becomes 4, and if they get an extra game, it could be 5. And that's a long trip, nearly the same amount of mileage in 3 time zones. But yes, it's a problem, but it's not the biggest problem. You can get around it in a lot of ways by scheduling. You play 2 games in a row at home. If you're the London team, you go over to the States and you play 2 or maybe even 3 games on the road in a row, so that you cut the travel down. They were very excited when the Colts went. The NFL was very excited when the Colts went back and played the following week after playing in London, because they proved, or they showed, that it could be done. That it wasn't that huge a factor for them.
Is there not a worry that the international element would actually demean the notion of America's game?
I don't think so at all. I think that's probably the least thing on their mind. I think they look at it as being something that should be more global. And we do call the World Series the World Series, and they call teams, for years they've called teams world champions. Although now they tend to back off of that a little bit. Is the World Series, was that a reference to a San Francisco newspaper though? No, it wasn't. And the Chicago World is the paper. Right. It's or the New York World. I forget which. It wasn't actually. It was simply the fact that at the time when they started playing the World Series, it was de facto the World Championship. There were no teams in other countries that were anywhere near as good. From the NFL's point of view, the biggest problem, the logistical problems are big, but can be sorted out, and the league has the resources and the wherewithal to be able to do that, to make it happen. The secondary problem is the Players Association, and I was talking to O.C. Umenyor, and O.C. was saying, well, if they pay me, I play anywhere. But it's not quite that simple, in that you'd be relocating players for a minimum of 4 months, but probably more. And people with young families would have to work out ways, or people with older families, actually, where the kids are in school, would have to work out ways around that. But the biggest problem to me is whether you can keep the audience for one team. As I said, British fans tend to be very tribal in their loyalties, and most NFL fans will have their own favorite team. Now, whether the London team becomes their de facto second favorite or not is one question, but even if it does, will those people buy season tickets for a London team? If the London team starts the season very badly and then comes back and they're pretty much out of the playoff hunt, before the halfway point of the season, will they keep going to games if they don't have season tickets? Will you get the same kind of crush of fans applying for the tickets? And what's happening right now makes money for the NFL. It fills up Wembley Stadium or Twickenham, and it'll probably fill up Spurs Stadium when they get there. And, I think what you'll see is they will keep expanding this and possibly move it to 1 or 2 other venues outside of London, just as an experiment. But basically, they are building the groundwork slowly but surely for a London team. And I think they have the luxury of not feeling the pressure to make one happen as long as the London Games, the international series, is proliferating and making money for them.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to this season particularly, we're pretty much halfway point. When we're looking at Super Bowl contenders, do we have to look much further than Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and two massive tight ends in New England?
I'm not as sold on the Patriots as their record would suggest. They've played really well offensively, no question. Probably their best offensive team since 2007, maybe, with Randy Moss. But I still wonder about them defensively, and they haven't had to face a really good offense. They've been really lucky in the sense that when they played Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger was out. When they played Buffalo, Sammy Watkins was out, and Shady McCoy was out. So they haven't really been tested that much, and Cincinnati played them very strongly for a half. But they play such smart football that they've been able to get away, say, without being a dominant defense. And now they've let one of their best defensive players go. They traded Jamie Collins the other day. And I can see how they can fill the spot, but I worry that they lose some of their flexibility by doing it, and they become very much thinner if there's an injury in the linebacker position without Collins. They're not great in the defensive backfield. Their defensive line could be better than it is, but I think part of it is that they play a kind of holding and waiting game. So and I'm not actually convinced by their offensive line either, but Brady tends to patch over those holes. And, when they play a really good defense, that's going to be a problem. And and when they play a really good offense, that's going to be a problem. So I'm in a wait-and-see mode with them.
Okay. I mean, they've managed to get it done with a second string and a third string quarterback as well.
That's true, too, yeah.
With Belichick, there is always a way, it would appear. Who do you think is their biggest threat then in the AFC? If Ben Roethlisberger is fit as well.
Yeah, Pittsburgh would be one of them. You can't count out Denver, even with Trevor Siemian at quarterback, because as they proved last year, they don't need to have a great quarterback in order to win games, and that's what they've been doing. That's what they did last week. Kansas City and Oakland are both factors in this. Oakland is the one that actually, to me, is the more promising, because they're sort of a young team that ought to get better as the season goes along. Kansas City has the kind of usual limitations that you get on an Andy Reid team.
Yeah, but they're strong at home. Can they get it done on the road, though?
Yeah, that's one question. And do they have a deep presence to stretch a defense? Their defense is getting better, though, and not so much because Justin Houston's back, but because Dee Ford really seems to have stepped up into his role and being very good. So I think that's where it comes. And the good thing from the Patriots' point of view right now is they're in position to have the top seed. And one thing they don't want to do is have to go to Denver in the playoffs. They might not want to go to Kansas City as well. Oakland, strangely enough, has played much better on the road this year than they have at home.
What do you attribute Oakland? I mean, it's. I think a few people were surprised in just how strong they have been, even after a slightly shaky start.
And part of that's maturity. But I really, you can just look and see what Reggie McKenzie has done over the past couple of years since taking over, and watch the way that roster has gotten better and better. And there's a lot of talent there. And I think also what you're seeing offensively is Derek Carr and Amari Cooper are maturing together. And Cooper, if he keeps playing the way he can play, he would become one of the league's top 3 or 4 receivers by the end of this season.
In the NFC as well, is it time for Jerry Jones to pick up a ring?
I gotta say, and it might sound petty of me, but I sure hope not.
No, I think that's the universal opinion, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's got that dilemma, and nobody doubts that it's his decision, not Jason Garrett's decision as to whether Dak Prescott keeps playing or whether not. I still think you have to like Seattle in the NFC, although offensively they've been very challenged so far, and they miss Thomas Rawls, I think, more than they thought they would, which is saying as well that they miss Marshawn Lynch more than they thought they would. Carolina still has the talent they had last year, if they can put their game together. But last year everything went right for them, and this year things are not going right. Who knows what's wrong with Green Bay? But Minnesota obviously has problems that go deeper than people thought, because Norv Turner's just quit their offensive coordinator, and without Adrian Peterson, what do you do? It's not necessarily his fault that they have to play one-dimensional with Sam Bradford. And I haven't mentioned Atlanta, who are actually playing very well at the moment, but defensively they're not very strong.
Mike, thank you very much for your time. It is most appreciated.
No problem.